Story 1. The Road Less Traveled. When I was a kid, my family used to travel a lot across the country. My parents loved being on the road, and that love of travel stuck with me and my twin brother, Raymond. It's actually what led us both into trucking. Raymond usually drove a Freightliner Cascadia, and I drove a newer Volvo VNL 860. Company issued, just a year old at the time, replacing my older 780. We worked for the same company based out of Houston, Texas. One trip in particular still haunts me to this day. I was assigned a long haul, Houston to Los Angeles, then from there a cross-border run to Vancouver, British Columbia. There was about a week between the LA drop-off and the Vancouver pickup, which meant I had some downtime in LA. My cousin lives out there, so I figured I'd take a little break and ask Raymond to ride along. He was down for it, and our boss didn't mind. The trip to LA was smooth. Open highways, beautiful scenery, and plenty of rest stops to break up the drive. The only real headache was the traffic once we actually hit LA, but we managed. We parked the truck at my cousin's place. He's got a big property, and spent the next few days just hanging out. Beaches, landmarks, even a run to Target to stock up for the next leg of the journey. We left LA later in the evening to avoid traffic. The sun was down, and after a few hours of driving, we got hungry and hit a McDonald's at a rest stop. Raymond was behind the wheel while I munched on a cheeseburger. That's when things took a turn. A sign on the highway said the road ahead was closed. No warning, no detour, just a forced exit onto some back country road in the middle of nowhere. We figured we'd reconnect to the highway further ahead. But this road just kept going. Flat, empty fields turned into thick forest, and by the time it hit midnight, we hadn't seen another vehicle for miles. Eventually, Raymond said he had to pee. So we pulled over to the side of this pitch-black road surrounded by trees. There were no lights, no wind, not even the sound of crickets. Just dead silence, and this awful smell in the air, like rotting meat. While Raymond went off into the woods, I walked back to check on the cargo. That smell got stronger, and my curiosity got the best of me. I headed back to the cab to grab a flashlight, but just before I reached the door, I heard something. A whisper. "Hey, Nick." I turned and saw Raymond walking toward me. He looked uneasy. "Did you see that?" he asked. "See what?" He pointed across the road into the trees. There was a light in the woods. Before I could respond, he froze, staring behind me. I turned and saw it too. Through the windshield, barely visible in the moonlight, were what looked like bodies, dozens of them hanging from trees. I grabbed the flashlight and lit up the forest. The beam confirmed what I hoped was just our imagination. There had to be at least a dozen bodies hanging there. Some of them looked fresh. Others were decomposing. One even looked like it had been gutted. I'm not exaggerating when I say it looked like someone had removed their organs. The sight made me gag. But then I made the mistake of turning off the flashlight. And that's when I saw it. Deep in the woods, a faint glow, a flickering, moving light, and it was coming closer. Raymond didn't wait. He grabbed my arm and shoved me into the truck. We slammed the doors, started the engine, and tore out of there. As we sped off, I looked in the side mirror. Figures, 5, maybe 10, were now standing in the road right where we had just been parked. One of them stood out. He or it was taller than the others and had something on its head. It looked like a mask or maybe a deformed skull. I don't know. I didn't want to know. We didn't stop until hours later at a truck stop gas station off the highway. While I pumped fuel, Raymond called the police and our boss to report what we saw. We still had to make the delivery to Vancouver, so we pushed on. No more detours, no more stops, unless it was absolutely necessary. Food, fuel, that's it. Weeks later, we found out we may have stumbled into some kind of cult territory. There were rumors about them, sacrifices, organ harvesting, ritual killings. They were supposedly active in some of the more remote regions between California and Oregon. None of it was ever on the news. After that trip, I couldn't shake the image of those bodies. A few weeks later, I quit my job and took a smaller local gig near my town. Raymond kept driving, but something in him changed. He still won't talk about that night. Story 2. The Midnight Delivery. This happened to me about 15 years ago when I was 13, and even now, I still get a knot in my stomach thinking about it. I grew up on a cattle ranch in the middle of nowhere, somewhere out in the Great Plains. Our house sat 5 miles down a gravel road surrounded by open pasture land. The nearest neighbor was 2 miles away. We were used to being isolated. My dad dealt with cattle deliveries all the time. Truckers would bring in shipments, and we'd unload them right at the chute. It was routine. That weekend, though, my parents had taken my little sister to Dallas, and I was staying behind to accept the late-night delivery from Nebraska on my own for the first time. I wasn't too worried. I'd done it plenty of times before, just never alone. My dad left me with one piece of advice. Don't tell the driver I was by myself. Midnight came and went, and there was no sign of the truck. Around 1 a.m., I finally saw headlights way off in the distance, but the truck didn't pull up. It just stopped in the middle of the road and sat there for at least 30 minutes. No movement, no one stepping out, just headlights in the dark. Eventually, it started creeping down the road and pulled up to the loading chute. I went out to meet the driver. Right away, something felt off. This guy looked completely disheveled. Clothes covered in dirt and stains, like he'd been living in them for days. He started mumbling about being late. Something about a flat tire, then animals on the road, then something about fuel. None of it made much sense. Then he asked how old I was. I gave him a vague answer, something like, old enough to help out, and he just stared at me for a second. Then he launched into this weird, rambling story about his younger years, saying he used to date a girl he later found out was related to him, and apparently he kept seeing her anyway. It was seriously disturbing. The way he talked, something was just wrong. It felt less like small talk and more like he was trying to get a reaction out of me. I didn't say much, just told him we should start unloading the cattle and that my mom was waiting inside. He grumbled something under his breath, then climbed up to release the first group of animals. I stayed back, counting them as they came off the trailer. That's when things got weirder. He opened the second group, then went inside the trailer to mess with one of the inner gates. A minute later, he yelled out to me, saying he needed help inside. I hesitated. That was something I'd never been asked to do before. No one ever needs help inside those trailers, especially not from a kid. I told him I needed to stay outside to count. He kept insisting. I kept saying no. It was clear he was trying to get me into that enclosed space, and I wasn't having it. After a few more back and forths, he finally gave up and opened the gate. He repeated this same weird tactic with the next 2 compartments, pretending to need help, getting frustrated when I wouldn't step inside, but each time I just said no. By the time the last group of cattle was off, his entire demeanor had changed. He went from being overly chatty to angry and short-tempered. Then, as if to test me one more time, he told me to climb into his truck cab and grab the delivery slip from his glove box. I wasn't about to turn my back on this guy or get into another confined space with him. I told him to get it himself. He stood there for a second, looking at me, then finally climbed in, grabbed the slip, and handed it to me. I signed it and told him we were done. As soon as he left, I sprinted back to the house. From the window, I watched his truck sit out there in the dark for over an hour before he finally drove off. I didn't sleep until he was gone. That delivery should have taken 20 minutes tops. Instead, it turned into one of the most disturbing experiences of my life. I don't know what would have happened if I'd stepped into that trailer. I'm glad I never found out. Story 3. The Silent Creeper. About 5 years ago, my now husband and I were making a long road trip from the East Coast to the West Coast. It wasn't our first time doing the drive. This time, we were just heading back to pick up the last of our stuff and grab our 2 dogs. By that point, we were just trying to get the trip over with, so we only stopped for quick bathroom or food breaks. I honestly don't remember which state we were in when this happened. After that many cross-country trips, all the rest stops start to blur together. It was probably around 3 or 4 in the morning when we pulled into a rest area. The lot was nearly empty, except for 1 car and a couple of semis parked in the trucker section. We figured we'd switch drivers, stretch our legs, and let the dogs out. My husband had been behind the wheel, so I told him I'd run to the restroom first while he stayed with the car and smoked a cigarette. The dog area was right near where we parked, but the restrooms were farther off, over a small hill. From the lot, you couldn't even see them. Even though I didn't feel unsafe, it was pitch black out and quiet, so my husband decided to walk most of the way with me, just to be safe. After I was done, I headed back to let the dogs out while he took his turn using the restroom. Now, I'm not exactly an intimidating person. I'm about 5'2", not very heavy. But I've got 2 big German Shepherd mixes who are extremely protective. On top of that, I grew up learning self-defense and know how to handle myself if I need to. So even though it was dark and we were kind of isolated from the main rest stop lights, I wasn't nervous. As the dogs were sniffing around, doing their business, I noticed one of the semis that had been parked on the far end start up and begin slowly moving. At first, I didn't think anything of it. I just assumed the driver was getting back on the highway. I picked up after the dogs and started walking toward the trash can when I was suddenly blinded by high beams. The semi had pulled up as close as it could to the dividing line between the truck side and the car side. And now the brights were aimed directly at me. At first, I was just annoyed. I tossed the bags, squinted into the lights for a second, then turned back toward the car. But as I was walking, the truck started flashing its lights again and again, like he was trying to get my attention. He crept his truck forward slowly, still flashing the brights, and my irritation turned into something else: unease. By now, my dogs had picked up on my change in mood. They stopped sniffing around and locked in on the truck, ears up, staring hard. I got close to our car, and the driver stopped again, still flashing the lights. I wasn't scared yet, just confused and pissed. I stood there, just glaring back at him, waiting for him to knock it off. Eventually, the flashing stopped. I started pulling out my keys, ready to get into the car. That's when both of my dogs froze. Their hackles went up. They started growling, and then I heard a door creak open. I turned around and saw that the semi's driver's side door was now open, and a boot was starting to step out. This guy was actually about to get out of his truck. I was standing there completely still, thinking how stupid this guy must be to approach someone with 2 large dogs, when suddenly my husband came walking back from the restrooms. He walked straight up to me, put his arm around me, and without hesitation flipped the guy off. The trucker paused, then slowly pulled his foot back into the cab, shut the door, and within seconds took off out of the rest area. Once we were back on the road, I told my husband about the lights flashing, and that's when he explained something I'd never heard before. Apparently, some truckers flash their lights at women at rest stops as a way to signal for, well, hookups. I was disgusted. I wasn't dressed suggestively. I was wearing layers. It was cold. I was driving a newer car, walking two big dogs, and obviously wasn't out there looking to talk to strangers. I don't think I was ever really scared, but the whole thing definitely crossed into creepy territory. The guy clearly thought I was alone, and something about his approach felt off, not just flirty or weird, but aggressive, like he expected me to respond. I've got creepier stories from our travels, but this one always sticks in my mind because of how casually it happened. Like it was just something that guy did all the time.